Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Live Talk with Bern Moses. Bern, we had this beautiful lamp here last week, and we were talking about genies. And you were talking about how everyone knows the story. If you want to make the genie of the lamp appear, you have to rub the lamp. And then we talked about right ways and wrong ways to rub the lamp. And that if there was only one right way, you were supposed to rub it this way, and the genie would appear.
And you notice how difficult that is, by the way?
It's
that
very
is
difficult.
not a natural...
It's not a natural response.
Exactly.
For me to do it just naturally, not thinking about it, I would probably go like this. And you said that was probably the worst way to rub the lamp.
It would seem so.
Because you're giving the genie mixed messages.
Right.
And we started talking about ways to give the genie, or our subconscious mind, we're making an analogy here for viewers who've just tuned in, the correct way to give messages to the genie or our subconscious mind so that we can have more power in our lives. And perhaps we could do a quick recap of what we discussed last week.
Yeah, essentially we were saying that the genie, of course, is a subconscious mind, has an incredible amount of authority and power over the direction our life is taking if we surrender to it, but that it tends to be a dominant servant. Knows it wants its way with us in order to save our lives from something that it doesn't understand. In other words, it's an indolent, ignorant genie except for the experience that it's had through our conscious mind, our interpretation, and is tempered, enhanced by a cognitive sieve, or the psychic sifting that goes on, that comes from repeated experiences and what have you. And we were talking about how if we had a servant in our home who was dominant, that would be an untenable existence. And yet that's what we have oftentimes if we're not conscious of the mind and how it works, in that we have a dominant subconscious who dictates the direction our life is taking, and then when it's not taking any direction at all.
And that's usually more of the same.
Oh yeah,
it
it'll
likes
cling
the status
to just
quo.
what is. You betcha. It'll conform in every way possible, hide out in every way possible. Now,
if I may, there's a statement that I heard this week that I really thought about a lot of what we were talking about last week, and it says that if you want to change some things in your life, you have to change some things in your life, and that idiocy is doing the same thing and expecting different results. And I think we do that so often. Why is my life the same as it was yesterday and last year and 10 years ago? But we're still doing the same things.
Essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
It's inane when you think about it, and yet there's a tendency to do that. And when we do break away, when we do say, this is going to be different, then we get the rats and roaches running around because the subconscious goes, what are you up to? We are not going to do it. And so we start talking to it and say, look, leave me alone, take your place in life, let me go on. And it becomes reluctant, and if we keep going, it becomes cooperative, essentially contributive, and maybe creative in some sense. Now, I'm taking liberty here only because of one thing. I used an analogy of riding a bike last time.
Right.
I know that, for example, children are riding bikes today in ways that we never imagined. If I could have done a wheelie when I was a kid in high school or grade school, see, in high school there was only 2 kids in the whole school who had a car. Most of us rode bicycles or the buses. But if I could have done a wheelie in junior high or high school, can you imagine the reputation I would have had? I mean, I would have been king of the block. And now they do it just naturally. And so there is this gradual improvement that's occurring because we get our genies to a place where they're contributive, and then maybe we can move forward. And it may assist in some strange way, but I've got a question mark.
Perhaps at the very least, if our subconscious mind is facilitating forward movement, it frees up our conscious mind to be more creative.
Good, thank you. Very astute. I appreciate it. We were saying last week that there's 2 ways that we can stroke our genie. Now, it's not a natural thing to do. Just like, for example, here, for me to stroke that lamp the right way, I've got to stop for a moment and think, because if I don't, I'll rub it this way every time. Or I'll, in other words, what I got to do, typically I find myself in front of a seminar, for example, and in order to be sure to do it right, I will usually grasp it here, which gives me a cognitive moment to think what I'm about to do, and then I will stroke the lamp this way.
Yes.
And that's my illustration. Well, the same thing over here. When we start to stroke the genie in real life, to influence that subconscious mind that has so much power to assist us in whatever we want to do, then we have to do it verbally. Now, Years ago, I was first introduced in 1957 to Ben Sweetland's book, I Can. And in there he talked about auto-conditioning. Auto-conditioning. And what it is, it's a repeated, and he went on to talk about affirmation. And those, when we affirm something over and over, there's an automatic conditioning of the mind that will occur eventually. Not right away, but eventually, and it's inevitable. It has to happen because it's already happened. But affirmations. Now, we've heard of affirmations, and a lot of times there's a feeling, and I've encountered it everywhere I've gone, that but they really don't work. And that's not so. They have to work. There is no way that they cannot. We are a sum total, a product of the thoughts that we've enjoyed or that we have accommodated from other people
or endured
on screen. Exactly. And so affirmations are working in our lives whether we like it or not.
Well, I think we find it all around us every day. I don't like broccoli. People say I don't like broccoli,
Sure.
and so they don't.
They don't.
Other people say I love broccoli, and so they do.
One of the things that I talk about is, does anyone know anyone who has trouble getting up in the morning? And always in an audience, somebody says, well, yeah, and sometimes you can tell they mean themselves. And I say, well, you understand that's why they have trouble getting up in the morning.
Because they say they do.
Because they say they do, and their friends say they do. And if they wrote a book about them, it would be written that they had trouble getting up in the morning. Those they create a condition that can be changed if you reaffirm. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Because what an affirmation is, essentially, and I'm taking a little liberty here with this so that we can keep communicating on it, but an affirmation is a first-party, singular commentary about the way, essentially, you have chosen things to be. Okay? In other words, it's an I can, or an I will, or an I am, or things are a certain way. Now, an affirmation can start out with an I can. Now, some people say, no, I'll go right to the reality. Well, if you don't really believe something is possible, even though you've seen other people accomplish it, if you have been short-circuited in some way from accepting your capacities, acknowledging that you could do it, then you better start with an I can, which essentially recognizes the possibility.
I see.
Okay? In other words,
if there's no possibility, why
yeah,
go
exactly.
forward? Yeah.
And so you have to acknowledge the possibility, and it might take a few days, few hours, a few weeks even, to really get comfortable with the fact that, yes, I can be the number one in my industry, or I can weigh 200 pounds if I choose to. And you wouldn't want to affirm that. But,
Depends on, maybe I want to be a sumo wrestler.
Yeah, well, that's true. But the I can recognizes a possibility. Now, an affirmation should be the culmination of a list of them. In other words, for example, you're not making an affirmation if you only do it once or 3 times a day. In other words, affirmation should be something where you sit down and you make a list of all the things in all the facets of your life that you would like to enrich, enhance, and enliven. Okay? In other words, everything that can be done. Somewhere on that list there's going to be one that's really special. One of them that if and when you accomplish that, you've accomplished a great deal. And perhaps
Yes.
a lot of the others as well. And so that's the one to focus on. And an affirmation would be the same thing you're saying over and over and over, keeping your conscious mind busy on what it is that it wants, rather than allowing the subconscious mind to busy us, okay, with what it wants to preserve.
All the reasons why you cannot.
Yeah, or from being influenced by outside people who want things for us. Follow what I'm saying?
Often the status quo.
This is a
Yes.
conscious thing. I can do this. All right? I can becomes, after a period of time, an I will. In other words, once you've really acknowledged the possibility, you have adopted the probability.
I see.
So in other words, the I will is recognizing the probability. If I keep doing what I'm doing, thinking what I'm thinking, writing what I'm writing, practicing what I'm practicing, I probably will accomplish this. Okay? And as you continue, there's a point in there where you can probably say, I can, which is the positive. I am, which is the positive part of it. Okay? Now, there is a way of enriching this. Some time ago, we talked about the trichotomy of the human mind.
Yes.
The fact that we have a subconscious and a conscious mind and a conscience. I really prevail upon people to start thinking in terms of themselves, purposely plural, as a we. Because when you say we, and Gina, I can't tell you how many people have gone and come back and said, it makes a difference. I really feel more in command of the direction my life is taking when I think of myself as a we, because that's indeed what we are. In other words, we're a trichotomy, 3 agendas. And if we can harmonize them, for example, if indeed there are 3 agendas and one of the entities is saying I, the other 2 may feel left out and go into resistance. And that's what's happening to most people's lives. And so as you're stroking, I would suggest that you say, we can.
So you think there's an incredible power in just the way you phrase it?
Oh, you betcha. You betcha. Now, the other day I was thinking about this and I got pretty excited. If and when you use I, be sure that you check in and acknowledge that it's the conscious mind speaking. Okay? In those, I want to do this and we can do it. In other words, in that first part, I'm talking about the conscious mind being in command, perceiving something new and fresh and different, and saying, okay, I want that, and we need to work together to get it. Now pulling in the conscious and the subconscious.
Okay.
So you can be talking back and forth, but certainly when you're doing that, you're aware, you're alert, you're conscious.
Yes.
Okay, we can, we will, and we are. Okay. Those could be the affirmations that would lead you to things heretofore unavailable. I'm positive of this. That too many people, too many experiences, too much favorable impact from this to think that it doesn't work.
Well, it certainly seems like this is a powerful way to state to yourself what your purpose is and to help you to stay on purpose in a conscious manner.
Now, this is right in concert, too, and we don't want to overlook the fact that there's another segment of our society that is right on, and that is the religious community that prays. And those prayer is essentially very similar to this. And of course, the believer has the impact of a creator, a God, an influencer, you know what I mean, and to support this.
So are you saying that prayer is a form of affirmation?
Yeah, it has to be. Because what do they say in the scriptures? Pray unceasingly. You know what I mean? Over and over. Now, what I'm submitting, there is a perfect prayer. Something to think about, if I may. And I don't want this to be a religious experience, but it's just an observation. The perfect prayer, it seems to me, would be a 3-parter.
Okay. The
first part is where you acknowledge and celebrate your capacity, to be grateful for what you have. And that was a mind to remember, to imagine, to dream, to choose, to make decisions, to walk, to talk, to see and feel and hear and smell and taste and love, and that you have fear to protect you. I mean, wow. I mean, this is exciting.
Pretty incredible.
And so the first step in a prayer would be to acknowledge and to celebrate and to be grateful for your capacities. Okay? That would be the first one. Acknowledge and celebrate. The second part of the prayer would be to accept the authority that's implied in all of that.
That if you have it, you're responsible for it.
Yeah, I mean, the authority that we've been given.
Yeah.
Wow. And to accept the authority. And then the third part of the prayer is to assume the responsibility.
Yes.
In other words, to be grateful for what you got, okay, and accept it and say, this is what I'm going to do with it for you. With you. You know what I mean? In other words, and for yours. There's no question. To acknowledge, accept, and to assume would create a very powerful prayer that would always answer itself. Always. Okay?
Well, and it seems to me in this context, it could be, it's a prayer regardless of your faith.
Exactly.
It's a way of stating things in a very powerful manner.
We get to this point and we have to talk in it for a little bit about the subliminal tapes. I remember when you know what I mean by subliminal tapes. I was always a little suspicious of those subliminal tapes. I mean, I remember saying, what are they really saying on those tapes? You know what I mean? The mind goes, I'm not sure I want to do this. And yet I've had friends who invested in them and claim to have benefited from them. And yet at the same time, we have to acknowledge that they're affirmation tapes. In other words, the tape is saying, I can, I will, I am. And the mind is hearing that. It's kind of like if I say to you, or to a member of the listening audience, I know you. In other words, I know your capacities. I know the gifts that are at your disposal. I sense that you're beginning to capture these ideas and that you're beginning to move forward, to accelerate, and frankly, someday you're going to be incredibly successful. I can applaud now what will be, and I'm so happy for you and what's going to occur. Okay? In other words, that is an affirmation. And what you need to hear is that you're the one with the talent, you're the one with the capacity, and that's a confirmation. So we have to be careful. An affirmation tape talks first party, and a confirmation is second party, but it's done verbally. We need to be confirmed in our life. In other words, this is another step in getting the job done, confirmations.
So you're saying subliminal tapes are confirmations?
No, I say that for the most part, I've seen that they were affirmation tapes and
because
short-circuited
they say
the process.
I am, they
Right.
say it in the first person.
Right. And they should be saying you are, but they should be saying it so you can hear it. Because the evidence is in fact, the Department of Health in Washington has disclaimed their validity. And they say, no, no, no. Now, there is a placebic factor in the affirmation tape, or the subliminal tape, and the fact that when you bought the tape, what was that? It was an affirmation. Okay? And then when you plugged it in or listened to it, that was an affirmation. And hopefully, when you were listening to the music or the nature sounds and what have you, while you were thinking about what it was you wanted, and that's an affirmation. But unless there's enough decibels coming from that tape to wrap that hammer against the anvil in the ear, there's no message going through.
I see.
Follow what I'm saying? And so there is some value, but it's no more value than you can do on your own.
It's more the value is in the action on your
Exactly.
part, not in what's coming over. And that makes sense to me too, because we see billboards that say buy a product, and we see it blatantly there, and we don't drive right off the road and go buy the
Right,
product.
right.
So to get an even more subtle message probably would be less
You know, that's an
powerful.
interesting thing, too. I've often wondered why advertising wasn't done in second party, or first party, actually. No, say you're driving down the road and you say, you want a Cadillac. That's what it says, okay? Now, when my mind sees that and my mind says that, that's not me.
Right.
It says, you want a Cadillac.
Who's you?
Where if I could read on the billboard, I want a Cadillac, I think
That's
the
an
advertising would
affirmation.
be more effective. Follow
it.
what I'm saying?
That's an interesting idea.
I'm amazed they don't do more of that. I've done some of it with some good result, but we're going to have to test some more of that. Confirmations. We have the right to go to our family, our friend, our loved ones, business associates, and say, look, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to accomplish. Will you confirm me in this? Will you applaud and support me in this? It's difficult for most people to do that because when they did it, they were denied.
Yes.
You know, if someone says, that sure is a pretty tie, and you say, yeah, I got Salvation Army. And so they don't say that anymore. Right. They let you alone. Yeah, ask people to confirm you, and if they won't, you can make a confirmation tape. It's one of the technologies that we don't use nearly enough, and that's a cassette player. You can actually confirm yourself in anything that you want. And the subconscious won't know the difference between a real situation and a synthetic one, and you can have an effect. In other words, your tape is saying you will, and you're saying I am, and between the two of you, you might get something done. That makes sense?
What an interesting concept.
Oh,
That's
and
great.
there is no question it would be a positive, forward-moving experience. There is another way. It's called proclamations. It's a third-party written statement, okay, about you. For example, if you had a proclamation written, it would be about Gina Fit, about Ms. Fit, if I may, about she, about her.
Like a newspaper article.
Yeah, and you'd read that, and it's another way to influence the subconscious. So between the affirmations, or among the affirmations, the confirmations, and the proclamations, keeping your mind busy on what it is that you really want, there would have to be some forward movement in your life in any direction you chose. This is all done verbally. And by the way, to do this, you got to get serious. For example, I'll have people leave the seminar, and I'll call them the next day, and I'll say, you doing your affirmations? And they say, oh, yeah. I said, well, what's your affirmation? Well, you know, they're kind of hazy about it, which means they haven't really established it yet. And I'll say, how many times did you say it yesterday? Oh, a bunch. Yeah, but how many? And I said, well, about 30 times. And so I said, well, that's good, but I mean, what did you say the other 49,970 times?
Oh, I
Remember
see.
we said earlier, you think about 50,000 thoughts a day. If you think about what you want 30 times a day, you may not get it.
And
You've
you
gotta
may
do
be
it over and
thinking,
over
I
and over.
can't, the other 4,000 at
Oh,
least.
no question. Yeah, because unless you are really affirming, chances are the subconscious will be clinging
Yes.
to what has been and probably will be, you know, that attitude. Yeah, you got to stay busy. Now, affirming is not like I saying once in a while. It's saying it over and over again. In 1957, after having an incredible experience with affirmations, moving from 1200th manager to number 1 in 90 days, I was excited. So I wanted to apply this to stuttering. And so I began to affirm, I can stop stuttering. I can stop stuttering. Well, I did that for several days, and I figured, well, yeah, there's a possibility. I'm okay. I'll go on to I will stop stuttering. And Gina, I was getting worse, and I was really confused. And one day, and I don't know where it came from, but it occurred to me, my gosh, what am I doing? Thousands of times a day, I was saying stuttering, 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 stuttering. As I was literally clinging to what was, even making it worse. And so I thought, whoa, I got to redo this. And so I created an affirmation that I speak clearly and crisply without hesitation or impediment. And I cannot tell you how many times I've said that in my life, and it has helped. There's no question. And yet from time to time, I will refer to myself as a stutterer. And what is that? It's an affirmation.
Absolutely.
It's kind of clinging to the old status quo. And yet, at the same time, it's done pretty well. Now, like I say, among those three, there's a lot of movement, and this is all verbal.
So let me ask you then, if, say, you wanted to lose 15 pounds, would it be better to say, I can lose 15 pounds, or would it be better to say, I am at my ideal weight, and I am thin and trim and attractive? Which would be a better way?
What would lose the 15 pounds? See, here's the thing. What would lose the 15 pounds? I lost 90 pounds here about 2 years ago. I was up to around 320 at one time in my life. But I lost 90 pounds, and the way I did it, my affirmation as I was running and walking and exercising was that I eat. I didn't want to go on a diet. Diet is a deprivation. See?
Right.
I said, I eat selectively and very slowly and therefore sparingly. That was my affirmation, and that got it done. In other words, after a while, I really was very selective. I mean, I went for a long time and never had a cookie. And I'm a cookie monster.
So
it really
you have to be
hurt.
very careful in how you word your affirmations in order, because you're going to get what you say. So you need to really determine what you're saying.
And the negative statement leads you into the positive realm. Like, I can stop stuttering. It's kind of like it was a negative statement, but the fact that what I wanted to accomplish was what I didn't want to accomplish was, coming up in my mind all day long. It's kind of like if you want a new car, and you don't have one, or the car you have is a real negative in your life, I wouldn't think too much about a car. Because just the word car could be a problem. Follow what I'm saying? I would think vehicle, perhaps, or transportation. I would think a particular brand, whatever it happens to be. This is pretty. Now, I'll tell you what way to get the car, though. Couple your verbal affirmation, confirmation, and proclamation with your visual stroking. In other words, we call it visualizing, would be one.
Okay.
In other words, we have the capacity, to visualize things that we would like to have or be.
A mental image? Okay.
And it's just as powerful as the verbal, maybe even more so. As a matter of fact, we talk about imaging. That's a common phrase these days, imaging. Dr. Mark Victor Hansen, some years ago, I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Hansen or not,
Yes.
He's a national speaker. He had a beautiful word called imagineering. And that was engineering with your imagination a brighter future. And I always like that term. And the one that I really fell in love with in this context is telesthesia.
Tell us what?
Telesthesia. Now, it's in the dictionary. I didn't make it up. But it's Telesthesia. It's a pretty word. And to properly define telesthesia, we have to talk about nostalgia. In other words, if I say nostalgia, does the mind go forward or backward?
Backwards.
And does it go to the good, the warm, and the fuzzy, or to the hateful and spiteful and dirty?
Warm and fuzzy.
Yes. And how vivid can a nostalgic experience be?
Extremely.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can hear sounds, you can feel fabric or texture, you can smell the aroma.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing. Well, telesthesia is nostalgia for the future. Okay, and those is going into the future to celebrate what has occurred in a positive way.
As if it were already existing.
Yeah, using all the senses. For example, in that car problem, what you would do is not only have a picture of the car, but I would go and drive the car and get a sense of how it feels. Remember the sound and the feel when it started up, when the door shut, the feel of the leather, In other words, absorb as many sensory things as you could about that car.
Make it become real.
Yeah, so that when you go forward, the subconscious mind buys into it. It becomes part of its status quo, and it reduces its barriers to accomplishing it. It works, Gina. There's no way that it cannot, because that's the way the mind functions.
Isn't that interesting?
See, what we are is a product of all this already.
Yes.
And so why not take command of those thoughts and get what we want instead of what it wants? Because it's not the most contributive thing in the world, like I said over here. Telesthesia. We have a delightful word, anthropomaximology is fun too. I mean, you want to say that one again. Anthropomology. Fun word, but really not so bad. It means the study of the maximization of the human entity. That's maximization, study of. And what it really is, it's the American definition of this word. So in other words, I'll tell you, the Russians really led the field in this particular area in sports.
Really?
And we copied, and we caught up, because it works. It always works. This is a fascinating thing. Become attracted to the possibility of the genie. Stroke the lamp on purpose, consciously, over and over and over again. And next week, I'm going to provide some additional tools that will help us do this more conscientiously, more consistently, more persistently.
Wonderful.
Just to give some tools to the people so that they can use them. And I won't be a bit surprised if we hear some miraculous news coming back to us. Not a bit surprised. Gina, we got a dash. I can't believe the day is over. Have everyone call 1-800-661-3490 and make a comment, a critique, a criticism.
We'd love to hear their comments if they're going to make some affirmations, what their affirmations are, and if they want to call in and say, these are the affirmations, and then call back in a few weeks and tell us the progress we've made. We'd love to hear from them.
Good. And always remember that this is Life Talk, and my name is Bern
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.
Good night. Good day. Good morning. There's another fast 10.